get any response to President Macron saying he will not join the Board of Peace?
Oh, did he say that? Well,
Yeah.
Nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, that's all right. What I'll do is if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join. But he doesn't have to join. If he said that, you're probably giving it to me a little bit differently. But if he actually did say that, but as you know, he's going to be out of office in a few months.
Did you invite?
Well, that wasn't a military. They sent a few people. And they say they sent them not for me, but to guard against Russia. But, NATO's been warning Denmark for about 20 years now, longer than that, 25 years. They've been warning Denmark about the Russian threat. And it's not only Russia, it's also China. So we'll see what happens. But let's put it this way. It's going to be a very interesting Davos. Goodbye, everybody.
Earlier today, European Union ambassadors concluded an emergency meeting in Brussels to address President Donald Trump's escalating campaign to acquire Greenland. The meeting, which lasted over 3 hours this Sunday afternoon, followed Trump's announcement yesterday that he would impose 10% tariffs on 8 European nations starting February 1st. These tariffs target Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and the United Kingdom, all NATO allies, and will increase to 25% by June if no agreement is reached for the United States to purchase Greenland. James Newman here. To understand what's coming, we need the truth. If you're ready for the unvarnished facts, subscribe to this channel right now. This morning, Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre confirmed receiving a text message from President Trump that adds an unexpected dimension to the crisis. In the message, sent yesterday afternoon, Trump explicitly linked his Greenland ambitions to his failure to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. The message states he no longer feels an obligation to think purely of peace and can now focus on what's good and proper for the United States of America. Trump claimed he deserved the prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, and argued that the world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. According to multiple sources reporting today, Trump forwarded this message to several European ambassadors in Washington. The Norwegian government released the exchange under Norway's public disclosure laws, with Støre noting that Trump's message came in response to a joint text he and Finnish President Alexander Stubb sent opposing the announced tariff increases. In a phone interview with NBC News this morning, Trump doubled down, claiming Norway totally controls it despite what they say regarding the Nobel Prize, despite the award being granted by an independent 5-member committee appointed by Norway's parliament, not the government itself. These developments from the last 24 hours represent the latest escalation in what has become known as the Greenland crisis, a situation that multiple analysts now describe as potentially the most serious rupture in transatlantic relations since the Suez Crisis of 1956. Yesterday, in Nuuk, Greenland's capital, an estimated quarter of the city's population, thousands of people, marched to the United States consulate carrying signs reading, "Greenland is not for sale," and chanting the island's indigenous name, Kalalit Nunaat. Similar protests occurred across Denmark, including a massive demonstration in Copenhagen, where protesters waved both Danish and Greenlandic flags in solidarity. The tariff announcement came just as a bipartisan United States congressional delegation was wrapping up a visit to Denmark and Greenland, aimed at de-escalating tensions. According to reporting from the last 48 hours, North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis, one of 2 Republicans on the 11-person delegation, blasted the president's announcement on social media, calling the push for coercive action to seize the territory of an ally as beyond stupid. Multiple credible sources have covered this story from various angles over the past week. Reuters, Associated Press, CNN, Al Jazeera, NPR, BBC, The Washington Post, NBC News, and CBS News have all provided extensive reporting. The European Commission has announced that European Council President Antonio Costa will convene an extraordinary meeting in the coming days to coordinate a unified response. France's Emmanuel Macron has reportedly requested activation of the European Union's anti-coercion instrument, colloquially known as a trade bazooka, with the EU discussing potential retaliatory tariffs of up to $108 billion on American products. 8 European nations issued a joint statement today declaring that tariff threats undermine transatlantic relations and risk a dangerous downward spiral. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who spoke with Trump by phone yesterday, told reporters this morning that while the Arctic region will require greater attention, greater investment, and stronger collective defense, applying tariffs on allies for pursuing the collective security of NATO allies is wrong. German officials, French representatives, and leaders across the European Union have echoed similar positions throughout the day. To understand how we arrived at this extraordinary moment, the timeline of recent events provides essential context. This crisis accelerated dramatically on January 6th when the Trump administration, shortly after conducting a military operation in Venezuela that ousted President Nicolás Maduro, began making explicit statements about acquiring Greenland. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller stated that day that the United States has the right to take Greenland. On January 9th, Trump declared he doesn't need international law and that seizing Greenland versus preserving NATO may be a choice for the United States. He also stated he would take Greenland the hard way if Denmark doesn't cooperate, and claimed he would do something on Greenland whether they like it or not. According to documents reviewed by multiple news outlets, Trump ordered the Joint Special Operations Command to develop plans for what he called a possible invasion of Greenland. This directive reportedly met resistance from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. On January 14th, following a meeting between Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen, Greenland Foreign Minister Vivian Motzfeldt, and United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance, the Danish officials emerged describing a fundamental disagreement that remained unresolved. Rasmussen told reporters at the White House that it was clear the president has this wish of conquering over Greenland. The following day, January 15th, multiple European nations began deploying military personnel to Greenland as part of Operation Arctic Endurance, a Danish-led exercise. France sent 15 soldiers. Germany deployed 13 reconnaissance personnel. And Sweden, Norway, Finland, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom all confirmed troop deployments. French President Macron described the mission as demonstrating that European Union troops can be quickly deployed if needed. Germany's Ministry of Defense, in a statement released Friday, said the mission allows forces to gather important insights about Arctic operations. On January 17th, massive protests erupted across Greenland and Denmark. Saturday's demonstrations in Nuuk drew families, children, and elderly residents who marched carefully across snow and ice. Marie Peterson, a 47-year-old Greenlandic mother, brought her 9-year-old daughter, Alaska, who crafted her own protest sign. Peterson told reporters she wanted her children to understand they're allowed to speak up and that Greenlanders want to keep our own country and our own culture. According to CNN reporters on the ground, shopkeepers in Nuuk reported significant increases in sales of survival gear, camping stoves, and freeze-dried foods, with locals expressing worry about potential military action or instability. It was during these Saturday protests that Trump, from his residence in Florida, announced the tariff threats. His Truth Social post claimed that European nations had journeyed to Greenland for purposes unknown and described their military exercises as A very dangerous situation for the safety, security, and survival of our planet. He justified the tariffs as necessary to protect global peace and security and ensure the situation end quickly and without question. Greenland itself sits at the intersection of multiple geopolitical interests. The world's largest island spans 836,000 square miles, making it roughly 3 times the size of Texas. Yet it has a population of only about 57,000 people. Approximately 90% of residents are of Inuit origin, descendants of the Thule people who migrated from the North American mainland in the 13th century. The indigenous name for the island, Kalalit Nunaat, means Land of the Kalalit in Greenlandic, the official language since 2009. 81% of Greenland lies under ice, but climate change is rapidly altering the Arctic landscape. As ice melts, new shipping routes are becoming navigable for longer periods each year. What's known as the GIUK Gap, the area between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, represents a strategic choke point for maritime traffic between the Atlantic and Arctic Oceans. Analysts note that new Arctic shipping lanes could cut transit times between Asia and Europe significantly compared to routes through the Suez Canal. The island's mineral wealth has attracted global attention. According to the United States Geological Survey, Greenland possesses approximately 36 million tons of rare earth elements, with about 1.5 million tons considered proven economically viable reserves. These minerals are critical for manufacturing electric vehicle batteries, wind turbines, permanent magnets used in defense systems, and semiconductors essential for artificial intelligence development. Greenland also holds substantial deposits of graphite, copper, nickel, zinc, and uranium, though uranium mining has been banned since 2021, following sustained local opposition. However, accessing these resources faces substantial obstacles. Greenland has minimal infrastructure. Few roads connect settlements, forcing residents to travel by boat, helicopter, or plane between coastal towns. The harsh climate, mountainous terrain, and environmental regulations all complicate mining operations. The Kvanefjeld Rare Earth Project, one of the largest proposed developments, was effectively shut down in 2021, despite being majority-owned by Australian company Greenland Minerals, with China's Shenghe Resources as the largest shareholder. Local opposition centered on environmental concerns and the presence of uranium alongside rare earth deposits. Multiple experts interviewed over the past week have questioned whether Greenland's minerals justify acquisition efforts. Ted Feldman, founder of Duran Mining Technologies, told NBC News this weekend, "I think it's a great idea to expand America's presence in Greenland to counter Russia and China, but I don't think we should go there for the minerals." He noted that even if minerals were extracted, they would likely still require processing in China, which controls approximately 90% of global rare earth refining capacity. John Hekawi, president of Stormcrow Capital, pointed out that United States rare earth reserves are estimated at 1.9 million tons, compared to Greenland's 1.5 million proven reserves, stating, "If the U.S. wants rare earths, they could simply dig them up in the continental USA." The strategic military dimension centers on the Pituffik Space Base, formerly known as Thule Air Base, in northwestern Greenland. This installation, operational since a 1951 defense agreement between the United States and Denmark, hosts approximately 150 American personnel and operates crucial missile warning systems, missile defense capabilities, and space surveillance equipment. It's the Department of Defense's northernmost installation and plays a vital role in tracking ballistic missiles and satellites. Under existing treaties, the United States already has extensive rights to maintain and expand military operations in Greenland with Danish consent. Greenland's political status has evolved significantly. It was a Danish colony from 1775 until 1953, when it became an integrated part of Denmark. Following a referendum in 1979, Greenland gained home rule, allowing limited self-governance. This expanded substantially with the Self-Government Act of 2009, which recognized Greenlanders as a people under international law with the right to self-determination. The act transferred control over 33 areas of governance to Greenland, including law enforcement, the Coast Guard, and the legal system. Denmark retained responsibility for foreign affairs, defense, and monetary policy, while providing an annual block grant currently worth approximately 500 million euros, roughly half of Greenland's public budget. Section 21 of the Self-Government Act explicitly grants Greenland the right to declare independence through a referendum, subject to approval by both the Greenlandic people and the Danish Parliament. Recent polling data reveals complex attitudes toward independence. A 2025 poll showed 84% of Greenlanders support eventual independence from Denmark, up from 68% in 2019. However, when asked specifically about independence, if it meant a lower standard of living, 61% oppose it, while 39% remain in favor. When presented with a binary choice between joining the United States or remaining part of Denmark, 85% preferred Denmark, while only 6% chose the United States. This presents the fundamental economic challenge facing Greenland's independence aspirations. The island's economy relies heavily on fishing, which represents approximately 95% of exports, along with tourism and the Danish block grant. Political leaders from across Greenland's spectrum, including the governing parties Inuit Ataqatigiit and Nalarak, as well as opposition parties Siumut, Democratic, and Nunatta Katorne, all include independence in their platforms, but disagree on timing and approach. Current Prime Minister Mute Borup Egede has stated clearly, "We do not want to be Danish. We do not want to be American. We want to be Greenlandic." Aja Chemnitz, one of two Greenlandic members of the Danish parliament and a member of the Inuit Ataqatigiit party, told CNBC last week, "Greenland never has been for sale and never will be for sale." She emphasized that while independence is a long-term goal, it must be achieved on good economic terms to maintain living standards. Greenland presented a draft constitution for an independent nation in March 2023, though there are no immediate plans to adopt it or hold an independence referendum. The NATO dimension of this crisis has alarmed security analysts worldwide. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is built on Article 5 of its founding treaty, which states that an attack on one member must be considered an attack on all. The prospect of the alliance's most powerful member using force against territory belonging to another member represents an unprecedented scenario that could effectively destroy the mutual defense guarantee that has underpinned European security for 77 years. Danish officials have stated explicitly that any attack on Greenland would trigger Article 5. Rasmus Jarlov, chairman of Denmark's Defense Committee, confirmed Denmark would invoke the article if attacked by the United States. European Union Defense Commissioner Andrius Kubilius declared that a United States invasion of Greenland would be the end of NATO, and that EU members would be under obligation to come to Denmark's assistance. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez told a Spanish newspaper in an interview published today that military action would make Vladimir Putin the happiest man in the world because it would legitimize his attempted invasion of Ukraine. Representative Michael McCall, a Texas Republican and former chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, told ABC's This Week yesterday that military invasion would turn Article 5 of NATO on its very head and, in essence, put us at war with NATO itself. Former Vice President Mike Pence told CNN's Jake Tapper that while the United States has an interest in Greenland, Trump's current posture, which I hope will change and abate, does threaten to fracture that strong relationship, not just with Denmark, but with all of our NATO allies. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte spoke with Trump yesterday about the situation and stated he looks forward to seeing the president at the World Economic Forum in Davos this week. According to reporting from Radio Free Europe and other outlets, NATO is now discussing establishing a permanent Arctic Sentry mission in Greenland, modeled on the Baltic Sentry mission that monitors northeastern Europe. The proposal, reportedly initiated by Germany, would see European nations handling air and sea patrols in the GI-UK gap, while the United States could expand its military presence under existing treaty frameworks. Congressional response in the United States has been mixed, but increasingly concerned. Democratic Senator Tim Kaine and Republican Senator Rand Paul appeared jointly on NBC's Meet the Press today, exploring options to constrain Trump's actions. Kaine said they're considering writing a new war powers resolution regarding Greenland, challenging the tariff announcements, or relying on laws stating the president cannot withdraw from NATO without congressional approval. Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona is leading efforts to introduce legislation restricting military action in Greenland. A Quinnipiac University poll released this week found 55% of American voters oppose trying to buy Greenland, including 85% of Democrats, 58% of independents, but with 67% of Republicans in support. What explains Trump's fixation on this particular territory? Administration officials have offered varying rationales. Vice President Vance stated last year, "We need to ensure that America is leading in the Arctic because we know that if America doesn't, other nations will fill the gap where we fall behind." White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller told reporters that Greenland must become part of the United States because the United States right now, we're the hottest country in the world. We're the strongest country in the world. Europeans project weakness. The U.S. projects strength. However, Trump himself has sent mixed messages about his primary motivation. In December, he stated, "We need Greenland for national security, not for minerals." Yet, his former national security advisor, Mike Waltz, told Fox News in January 2025 that the administration's focus was about critical minerals and natural resources. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told NBC's Meet the Press yesterday that Trump is using the economic might of the U.S. to avoid a hot war and preventing a future national emergency, though Bessent also told reporters in Davos today that claims Trump's actions stem from the Nobel Prize issue are a complete canard. The Nobel Peace Prize angle adds a personal dimension that has surprised many observers. Trump has long sought the award, which the Norwegian Nobel Committee awarded last year to Maria Corina Machado, Venezuela's Democratic opposition leader. When Machado presented her physical medal to Trump last week in Washington, following the United States intervention in Venezuela, Trump said he planned to keep it and called it a wonderful gesture of mutual respect. The Nobel Committee subsequently clarified that while the physical medal may change hands, the honor itself cannot be transferred, revoked, or shared. In his phone interview with NBC News this morning, Trump insisted Norway totally controls the prize, despite repeated explanations that the five-member committee operates independently of the government. What are the competing perspectives on this crisis? From the European viewpoint, Trump's actions represent an existential threat to the rules-based international order and the principle that borders cannot be changed by force. European Council President Antonio Costa stated Saturday that Europe will remain united, coordinated, and committed to upholding its sovereignty, and that the European Union will always be very firm in defending international law, wherever it may be. French President Macron declared that no intimidation or threat will influence us, neither in Ukraine, nor in Greenland, nor anywhere else in the world when we are confronted with such situations. From the Trump administration perspective, as articulated by various officials, Greenland represents a critical national security imperative. They argue that China and Russia pose growing threats in the Arctic that Denmark cannot adequately counter with its limited military capabilities. Trump has repeatedly claimed, including in his message to Norway's Prime Minister, that Denmark has only 2 dog sleds for protection, a characterization Danish officials have forcefully rejected. In fact, Denmark maintains the Joint Arctic Command with around 150 permanent personnel, regularly deploys the Arctic Response Force with aircraft and ships, and operates the elite Sirius Dog Sled Patrol in northeastern Greenland. Though this patrol comprises only a small part of Danish and allied military capabilities in the region. Some analysts see Trump's approach as potentially effective leverage if the ultimate goal is increased European defense spending in the Arctic, rather than actual annexation. The Atlantic Council published analysis yesterday suggesting that if NATO European members and Canada agreed to contribute significantly more forces to Arctic security, the Trump administration could assert that its pressure tactics worked, and Trump could claim a win and retroactively claim vindication for his initial threats. This interpretation views the Greenland campaign as similar to Trump's pressure on NATO members to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP, a goal achieved at NATO's 2025 summit in The Hague. However, critics, including multiple Republican senators, argue this approach is backfiring spectacularly. Senator Tom Tillis, co-chair of the Senate NATO Observer Group, stated that Trump's threats violate treaty obligations and damage relationships with allies. The European Parliament's Manfred Weber announced today that, given Donald Trump's threats regarding Greenland, approval is not possible at this stage for a recently negotiated United States-European Union trade agreement that had offered favorable terms to the United States. If that deal collapses, or if Europe implements substantial retaliatory tariffs, American consumers could face significantly higher prices on European imports during a midterm election year when polls show voters concerned about Trump's economic performance. Several critical questions remain unanswered after today's developments. First, will Trump actually implement the threatened tariffs on February 1st? Or is this a negotiating tactic? The White House has not provided detailed implementation guidance, and markets are beginning to react with uncertainty. European Commission officials have indicated they're preparing retaliatory measures, but hope for de-escalation. Second, what role will the working group established after last week's Washington meeting play? Danish and Greenlandic officials agreed to ongoing discussions with the United States on Arctic security cooperation, but Danish Prime Minister Frederiksen stressed this does not change the fact that there is a fundamental disagreement because the American ambition to take over Greenland is intact. Third, how far will European military deployments in Greenland go? While current troop numbers are small and described as routine exercises, Denmark announced Wednesday a 14.6 billion kroner increase in Arctic defense spending and plans to acquire 16 additional F-35 fighter jets. If tensions continue escalating, would additional forces deploy? And what would that mean for NATO cohesion? Fourth, will congressional action in the United States meaningfully constrain presidential authority on this issue? While war powers resolutions and other legislative measures are under discussion, their prospects in a Republican-controlled Congress remain unclear, particularly given polling showing Republican voters support the Greenland acquisition effort. Fifth, What happens when Trump and European leaders meet at the World Economic Forum in Davos this week? NATO Secretary General Rutte suggested ongoing discussions, but with positions appearing hardened on both sides, the potential for either breakthrough or further deterioration exists. Sixth, how are Russia and China actually responding? While both nations have increased Arctic activity in recent years, Russia operates approximately 8 nuclear-powered icebreakers, while the United States has only 3 polar icebreakers. Multiple security analysts, including Senator Mark Warner, have questioned whether the threats Trump describes are accurate or exaggerated. European officials point out that the current crisis itself may benefit Moscow and Beijing by dividing NATO allies. Finally, what do the Greenlandic people want for their future? While polls show clear opposition to United States control and preference for eventual independence from Denmark, the economic realities of independence remain challenging. Greenlanders face difficult choices between maintaining current living standards through continued Danish support, pursuing independence despite financial uncertainties, or considering partnerships with other nations to develop their mineral resources and economic independence. As this situation continues to develop, several broader implications deserve consideration. The crisis has exposed fundamental questions about American foreign policy priorities, the durability of long-standing alliances, and whether territorial acquisition remains a legitimate objective in 21st century international relations. It has also highlighted the vulnerability of small populations caught between great power competition, the complexities of decolonization and self-determination in the modern era, and the challenge of balancing national sovereignty with collective security arrangements. For Greenlanders themselves, the international spotlight has amplified voices like politician Pipaluk Ling, who met with the United States congressional delegation and told reporters, "We are worried. The children of Greenland are worried. But we as politicians have to work on making collaboration. I'm hoping that this also can be sent to the White House, that we're open for business and open for dialogue, to compromise." Yet compromise on sovereignty and territorial integrity presents inherent difficulties when one side's stated position is complete and total control, and the other's is not for sale. The economic dimensions extend beyond Greenland and Denmark. According to United States Census Bureau data, America traded $236 billion worth of goods with Germany in 2024, $148 billion with the United Kingdom, $122 billion with the Netherlands, and $103 billion with France. Disrupting these trade relationships through tariffs could have cascading effects on supply chains, prices, and economic growth on both sides of the Atlantic. Stephen Durloff, a professor at the University of Chicago's Harris School of Public Policy, told CNN, "These actions really do represent an end of the credibility of American commitments. That's going to have adverse effects on the world economy." From a security perspective, the potential consequences of NATO fracture are profound. The alliance has deterred major power conflict in Europe for over 7 decades. If Article 5's credibility erodes, every NATO member becomes more vulnerable, potentially encouraging aggressive actions by adversaries. The Baltic states, Poland, and other frontline nations have depended on NATO's collective defense guarantee for their security. Several analysts have drawn parallels to how Russian President Putin might interpret NATO disunity as validation for his approach in Ukraine. What should observers watch for in coming days and weeks? The European Union's extraordinary summit later this week will likely produce a coordinated response strategy. The February 1st tariff implementation date provides a deadline for potential de-escalation or further escalation. Congressional deliberations on constraining executive action will indicate whether domestic checks on presidential power remain viable. Continued demonstrations in Greenland and Denmark will show whether public opposition intensifies or moderates. And, most importantly, whether Trump's rhetoric represents an opening negotiating position that will evolve or a fixed objective he intends to pursue regardless of consequences. To recap the key developments from the last 24 hours, European Union ambassadors held emergency meetings today following Trump's Saturday announcement of tariffs on 8 NATO allies starting February 1st. Norwegian Prime Minister Støre confirmed receiving Trump's message linking the Greenland campaign to the Nobel Peace Prize, with Trump stating he no longer feels obligated to think purely of peace. 8 European nations issued a joint statement warning the tariffs undermine transatlantic relations and risk a dangerous downward spiral. Thousands protested in Greenland and Denmark over the weekend, with Greenlanders overwhelmingly opposing United States control. The European Commission is preparing potential retaliatory tariffs of up to $108 billion on American products. The fundamental questions this crisis raises deserve continued examination. Can long-standing alliances withstand fundamentally opposed positions on territorial sovereignty? Will economic pressure change minds, or simply harden positions and damage prosperity on both sides? Does the United States gain more security through cooperation with willing allies, or through unilateral control of strategic territory? And ultimately, whose voice matters most in determining Greenland's future? The great powers competing for influence, or the 57,000 people who actually live there? What's your assessment of how this situation should be resolved? The comments section is open for your thoughts on balancing security interests, respecting sovereignty, and maintaining alliance relationships. This is a developing story, and I'll continue covering it as events unfold.